decide to say something. Lightweight, step it aside when we come in. Feel it in your chest, the syllables get pumping. People on the street get panic and start running. Words on loose leaf sheet, complete coming. I jump on my mind, I summon the rhyme I'm dumping. Healing the blind, I promise to let the sun in. Sick of the dark ways, we march to the drumming. Jump when they tell us that they want to see jumping. Dad, I want to see some fist pumping. Lift something, take back what's yours. Say something that you know they might attack you for. Cause I'm sick of being treated like I had before. Like a stupid standing for what I'm standing for. Like this war's really just a different brand of war. Like it doesn't cater to rich.
All right, good evening, everybody. This is Charlie McGrath, Wide Awake News Radio. It is the third day of October. What do we got here? It's Wednesday, and a good program lineup for you guys tonight. You know, I know a lot of folks are going to be the program asking him if he had the wherewithal to watch this debate debacle that'll be going on tonight. And he assured me that he would rather pluck out his eyes and fill his ears with cement than tune in to that debate going on in Colorado. I probably will watch it after the program tonight on a rebroadcast, just because, you know, it's like I said last night when Bob was on the program, that even though I know it's a farce, I think in order to speak to it, in order to talk about it and see what kind of propaganda is being pushed our way, what kind of momentum is being built in the lexicon. You know, are we going to be pushing for an immediate war after these elections? Are we going to be being edged into a financial crisis before or after these elections? You know, and we can always tell what's coming next. Usually, I should say, not always, but usually, by how the propagandists start to spin things and start to frame the debate, frame the crisis in some cases. So I'm sure more than likely we'll touch on this topic tonight, tomorrow night. But tonight we have the RadChick starting out for the first hour, and she sent me some very, very troubling information before the program tonight, and so I have a hunch I know what this first hour is going to entail. We're going to start off by talking about the sinkhole in Louisiana and what Christina has surmised. It sounds like that she's done quite a bit of research on this, and she's going to paint a pretty a very informative but also very terrifying scenario that may be unfolding. So if you're not in the chat room and you want to join the folks in chat, wideawakenews.com is the website. Click on the radio microphone, and you can join the folks in chat. Like I said, first hour is Christina Consolo, the RadChick, also known as the RadChick. And hour number two, we're going to have Freeman Burt. You guys remember him. He was on about a month ago. The individual who had the courage to go through Denver International Airport and film the abusive nature of these so-called law enforcement officials who basically arrested him for doing absolutely nothing. He is going to come on tonight and tell us, we're not really going to get into that story too much, but some of the efforts he is doing to try to help people stand up for their own individual freedom. All right, let's get this thing rolling, because I know Christina has got a bunch of information she wants to share with us tonight. So, Christina Consolo, thank you very much for once again joining us on Wide Awake News Radio.
Thanks for having me here.
Oh, you're so welcome.
We're gonna spin things from the geological sense, I guess, the October surprise 2012 style.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, can I just read this giant paragraph you sent me earlier on some things that you've been following?
Sure.
Okay, here it goes. It goes, "Hey, Charlie," that's me. Just a little update for tonight. I started noticing 2 months ago rad levels going up without relation to weather. I found 30 times this happened since June related to earthquakes. Around this time, I learned of the Louisiana sinkhole and the fact radioactive material had been stored all over these salt caverns. The more I started digging into it, the more I realized that this may be related to the BP disaster. The ground in the Gulf seems to be sinking, and the sinkhole in Louisiana is just a symptom. I think this is what the powers that be are planning for. and that is what the U.S. And add to this, the U.S. Army started Mission Assumption October 1st. Just north of the area, of course, is the new Madrid Fault. If that area is sinking, which it appears to be for at least 80 miles, possibly more, the pressure could make fault go off and or rupture the continent of 50-plus salt domes storing munitions, mustard gas, radioactive materials, a nuclear, biological, chemical room. 700 million barrels are also stored, I'm assuming of oil, are stored from the strategic reserve, blah, blah, through Texas. So, I mean, that was the gist of it. And it went on with some more scary things that are stored underground in that region. But let's get right into this. The first thing I want to pick your brain about is these rad levels. Typically they're weather related, and you're finding something pretty spooky in the data.
Well, I think I sent you a link to one of the graphs for Kentucky, just showing the overall increase in the rad levels east of the New Madrid Fault Zone over the past couple of months. And it was something that I just kind of stumbled across, and I started noticing this correlation to earthquakes. So I put everything into an email and I sent it off to some people. And at that time, one of them was Lorraine Murray, who's a pretty well-known conspiracy theorist, and she's been all over Fukushima and all over a lot of the government involvement and false flags and things like that. And she said that she felt, at that time at least, that with a huge point source like Fukushima, that it was probably coming from there. But the thing is, it didn't correspond to any of the weather patterns, and I've been watching this fallout situation, and I studied everything that I could about the atmospheric testing and what the civil defense learned from the atmospheric testing and how radiation travels in the air and how it is brought down to the ground by precipitation and things like that. But these rad level spikes weren't happening in association with the jet stream or the tropopause or any rain or snow or anything like that. They were occurring around the time of earthquakes. And they were small ones. Some were just in the range of 2 to 3. But I started following this, and the more I paid attention to that, the more I saw this correlation. So my initial theory was that some of these radiation spikes, I mean, I agree that some of it is coming from Fukushima, but some of it's also coming out of the ground. So the question is, why would it be happening now? Why would we be seeing this happen? And if you think about, if you have a big puddle of water and you lay a plastic sheet over the top of it, you're going to have bubbles. Right. And if you step on the bottom of that, you're going to push those bubbles up, and it almost looks like that's what's happening. A couple other indications of that would be the sinking that's going on in Louisiana. I mean, this started out at one location. Texas Brine had said that they nicked the edge of a salt dome when they were drilling a year ago, and they warned that there might be some instability in this cavern. But just over the last few days, what we've learned is that cavern is actually leaking from underneath. So something's either eaten away the salt or it's destabilized along the bottom. And, all these aquifers, everything is connected underground. And then we've kind of enhanced that effect by all the fracking that we've done everywhere, where we've drilled channels into the ground to tap off the gas from these reserves. And I mean, these extend all the way up, into New England and Michigan. But a few other things that I started noticing is it's kind of unusual to see tritium leaks coming from nuke plants. There was a pretty famous case about 15 years ago from the Vermont Yankee plant, and there was all kinds of drama that came out of this because it ended up being a court case, and some of the executives from the plant lied about there being leaks underground from pipes, and it turned out that they perjured themselves on the stand, and then they went to jail for that. But aside from that point, there were 3 plants in the United States, one in Louisiana, just north in Baton Rouge, called River Bends. Right. Was reporting a huge increase in tritium being measured in the wells along the property of this nuke plant. So their pipes are leaking underground, and so are a couple other plants, Surrey and one other, I don't recall the name at this time. So that's an indication that there might be some destabilization of the crust occurring. Something's moving underground that's breaking these pipes. And then, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's been a lot of sinkholes, train derailments, some of them from bridges moving. There's actually been reports of bridges moving as far away as New York, Chesapeake Bay. We've had earthquakes all along the St. Lawrence Seaway. We've had sinkholes along the St. Lawrence Seaway. Places where you don't usually see this kind of stuff happening, and it seems to really be escalating.
It is indeed, and all of this made me think when I read your message about a warning that was given out by the military just a few months ago. We're going to talk about that on the backside of this break. We have Christina Consolo, the RadChick, and more Wide Awake News Radio in just a few minutes, guys. Hang tight. Guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. I'm Charlie McGrath, your host. Christina Consolo is our guest tonight, the RadChick. Christina, you're still broadcasting weekly, correct?
Yes, we're on twice a week. Nuked Radio is on UCY TV now, and then I upload the shows to YouTube. They get shared all over Facebook, and we're actually covering this sinkhole theory. We did half of a show. We did half of it on Tuesday, and we're going to do the other half tomorrow. And yesterday's show was just background information about who all the players were, information about the BP spill, because, it did happen a while ago. So much has happened since then. A lot of people have forgotten, how devastating that spill was, and some of the things that geologists and oil people were warning about at the time was that they were worried that the Gulf of Mexico was going to sink from the amount of oil that was released. And there were estimates, they were saying, BP was saying it was 63,000 barrels a day, but people in the oil industry like Matt Simmons,
right,
who later died mysteriously in his hot tub, was saying it was closer to 120,000 barrels a day, and that was never capped, that the well that we were seeing on TV was not the actual spill. The actual spill was about 10 miles away from there.
And he isn't the only one. We remember when Simmons was found, it was, dead in his hot tub on a July, I believe it was July or August evening.
Yep, it was August.
Yeah, but since then, there's been at least one other, right? It's mysterious, miraculous, bizarre death on a potential whistleblower.
There's been 7 or 8, actually. I'd have to bring up the article to remember who all these people were. One of them, a guy disappeared who was a vet who was investigating the effects of the BP spill on swans in the Sarasota area. He disappeared, closed his practice, and no one's heard from him again. There was a guy who was trying to raise awareness doing a cross-country bike ride and was getting a lot of publicity for it, and then he was hit by a car a few miles from the end of this trip. And a couple other scientists, some of them were actually into like the biotechnology part of it, bioweapons and things like that. And we found out later after the BP spill that there was a company that was run by a guy named Craig Venter who has ties into Sandia Labs, which is a division of Lockheed Martin, and they have quite a bit of experience in not only detonating nukes inside of salt domes, but in depositing radioactive material in salt domes. And he actually created a synthetic form of bacteria that they were testing on the Mercando well, and they injected it into the well prior to drilling to help the oil expand.
Right.
And what this bacteria does is it multiplies rapidly, and it's created to survive in very harsh environments and in hot or cold or very dark environments. And it had never been tested outside of a lab before. They shot this into the well, and then that just happens to be the well that explodes, cracks the ground all over the place, that they have an extraordinary difficult time capping, if that well was ever even capped. And, we don't know what that stuff has done underground since then. And then they've sprayed, all kinds of Corexit, which is basically like a food for the oil microbes
right.
to feast on.
To break it up. And they're still spraying.
There's so much complexity to this problem. And now DHS has been brought onto the scene of the sinkhole, but DHS has called in 7 government agencies, and they're also bringing in people from Sandia for their expert opinions, and they're looking for people who have expertise in the Synthia and in Corexit too. So I'm wondering if they think that maybe that's eaten through the bottom of some of these salt domes. But that area is expanding, and on a daily basis, it's getting worse. It started out at like 3 bubbling sites, then it was 30. Then last week they reported they're now seeing bubbling And it's not just bubbling, the water is like boiling in some of these bayous 4.5 miles away. But a senator came out 2 days ago and said that they're seeing the same thing happen in Lake Pinoir, which is an area in the 80s that had a salt dome collapse. And that's about 80 miles away from this sinkhole location. So we could be talking about a very broad area that this is affecting.
Well, you know, and I'm dropping into chat right now a story that, like I said, it sparked my memory when you know, this sinkhole thing occurred, and this other information that you sent me earlier today. But there was a lot of hype just a few months ago, July and August, of the military giving a warning to coastal dependents. Do you remember this?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, it was first reported on John Moore's program, and you know what I remember about it, what sparked my memory about it was the coastal evacuations that are, you know, the dependents were called in and told to be prepared to, you know, to bug out at a moment's notice. And you know, I listened to the old interview. I just dropped it into chat. It's about 30 minutes long. And John Moore is, you know, he's trying to tie it to Narubu or whatever. But it strikes me as, when the sinkhole occurred and this information you're bringing, it strikes me as very unusual, that all of a sudden, and it isn't all of a sudden, it's an ongoing, but all of a sudden it does seem to be escalating. And not only, you know, are you talking about, you know, this material bubbling up through the swamps, and the bayous, and which I believe you believe there's radon and other potentially harmful. Shoot, are you kidding me? We're done with segment 2 already. I want to get into this. I want to get into not only what's happening there, but if you follow up the Mississippi, you know, North Dakota, South Dakota has been having some weird seismic activity as well. Of course, the oil companies say it has nothing to do with fracking, but let's get into that on the backside of this break. Guys, hang tight. Christina Consuelo, the RadChick, will be right back with us on Wide Awake News Radio in just a few minutes. Guys, welcome back to Wide Awake News Radio. I'm Charlie McGrath. Your host, Christina Consuelo, is our guest. We are talking about very strange events occurring in the South, but it's not only in the South. And you know, the first segment we were pointing out that, you know, we talk about disasters. We talk about what happened with the BP Gulf oil spill. A lot of people think it's still ongoing. You know, that the Hopi prediction's right, that the seas are going to turn black. But that disaster is still ongoing. I mean, it's ongoing. We just don't get to hear about it ever. And the relationship between that disaster and now these sinkholes and this bubbling of the bayous, which could be radon. Christina's going to talk here in a minute about this very bizarre sulfur odor a lot of people have been reporting. In fact, she just told me during the break that she called the authorities to investigate this. And then going back even, you know, you would ask me earlier, or you had said earlier in the break that a lot of people want to know from you if you think Fukushima was completely and totally a staged event or done purposefully. And what was your response to that? I mean, what is your response to that now? Because it seems ridiculous, right? I mean, you have a giant earthquake, 9 point or whatever, and it floods out that plant, and all the so-called backups fail, and we have this disaster. But what is your take on it now?
Well, I read everything that I come across, even if it's related to that. And for a long time, like I didn't really talk about it because I mean there was enough evidence that it was bad enough that it is, let alone if it was done on purpose. It's hard to believe that anyone would be even capable of manufacturing that type of disaster. Seen now, especially what Japan is dealing with in terms of sickness and the thyroid reports that have been coming out about kids in northern Japan. Half of them are showing disease of the thyroid around Fukushima. And the more information, and some of it came from sources like MIT, showing that prior to the Tohoku earthquake that there were large circular disturbances in the ionosphere that could have been HAARP directed at the faults I came across some information that there was an Israeli trawler parked over the fault that ruptured 2 months before the quake. And then Israel also had a security team, and this was verifiable, that went into the Fukushima plant and installed security cameras a few months before the plant blew up. And at that time, they could have easily installed Stuxnet into their computer system just by putting a jump drive in the control room, and they had access to the control room. And there's been some people who've outlined some very meticulous research about this, everywhere from the earthquake not being a normal earthquake. It was missing a P wave at the beginning, which signified that it could have been an explosion underground. And then if you saw what happened at that fault for months afterward, I mean, it was amazing how many quakes occurred in that area. Jim Stone is one of the people that has reported on this. Loren Murray has reported on this. And seeing now what's happening in the United States, seeing what could happen if something went off like the New Madrid Fault and the dozens of nuke plants that we have in the area, I can't help but wonder what if, we nuke Japan. I mean, we've done it twice before, to see what the effect would be of a multiple meltdown scenario and the effect it would have on the population, the sickness that would arise out of that, the effectiveness of the evacuation zones, the effect on the wildlife, on the food supply, the reaction of the people, and just study that. I mean, Japan's isolated. It's an island. Maybe they didn't intend for as much fallout to get over here, or for people to get on this the way that they have and try to figure out what's going on. But, there is a possibility, and it becomes almost stronger, week to week from what I'm seeing happen now. And the lack of response or help from any of the international community is really concerning, especially since we still have kids that are living around that plant.
Yeah, or even the coverage. I mean, there's very, very few. I know Jeff Rentz is he's dogged in keeping to continue to cover this, and I know you are as well. But man, this is, I mean, for the media, for the average person that you would walk up and talk to, that's ancient history. It doesn't, it's like the BP oil disaster. It's ancient history. They're just not talking about it at all.
The U.S. government has a history of studying things like that, and they've studied their populations in various ways. In fact, there was a sociologist that published some research last week that the Army sprayed residents of low-income communities in St. Louis in the 60s with radioactive material and then tracked the sickness.
Crazy.
Did you hear about that story?
Yeah, I did. And you're right. I mean,
we experiment on populations all the time, sometimes even our own. But, the biggest telling thing is we nuked Japan in the past.
Yeah, we've done it before. We absolutely. I did just put in the chat a minute ago, probably about the time that I'm speaking. It'll be coordinated time-wise. But this story of North Dakota earthquakes happening up there, and they're calling them minor. I think they're in the caliber of less than 4.0, but this is in an area that's not used to seismic activity, and it just happens to be the earthquake, which registered in a magnitude of 3.3 according to blah blah blah, took place Friday. So this would have been late last week. Of course, this is happening right in Williston. I mean, this is in Williston, North Dakota, right where it's the heart of the Bakken Reserve, and they are fracking the living hell out of that region in order to pump this oil to accessible depths. And now we're starting to see seismic activity there. But so if you draw a line, right, that whole the whole heartland, there's this increased activity. Seismic activity, as well as what you're reporting, which is just bizarre sinkholes and off-gassing of one thing or another. And you would wanted to make sure we talked about the sulfur emissions, the sulfur smells that people are reporting. Is that? I mean, that's broader than just the South, right?
Right. Well, we had noticed it in my area about 2 months ago. And in fact, one day my boyfriend was driving back here from work, and across about a 30-mile stretch from Dearborn to Pontiac, Michigan, you could smell sulfur really strong, like someone had just set off fireworks. And when he told me about it, I said, you know what, that's funny because the night before I smelled it when I walked out to the car to get something. And then we started mentioning it to people. Other people were saying in the area they were noticing it. And when I put out some information about it on Facebook, because it can be a precursor to a large earthquake, and this has been documented since the 1700s, with a strong smell of sulfur prior to large earthquake events like the San Francisco quake, the New Madrid quake sequence, and other earthquakes around the world, in Germany, in China, in Japan. Even though USGS doesn't use that as criteria to predict where an earthquake might occur, I was concerned enough about it that I called them. And they actually had me speak to the National Response Center, the NRC, FEMA called me. I mean, there were a lot of agencies that were interested in this and took all the information. No one ever got back to me about it, but since then I've seen other people posting they're smelling it in West Virginia, North Carolina. There's been reports of the ground shaking around Charlotte a few days ago, and then there was a very strong sulfur smell being reported all along the LA basin after a large earthquake swarm that occurred just south of there in Brawley, California,
all right, well,
south of the Salton Sea.
Let's hold it there for a minute, and we're going to talk potential outcomes and potential things to be on the lookout for, not only with radiation levels across the country, as you usually give us our report, but these other events as well. We're going to be back with Christina Consolo, more Wide Awake News Radio, in just a few minutes. Hang tight. Okay, good. I had to do some quick restarting with the computer, and I had to shut down my system, and it 3 seconds ago is when it fired back up. So we continue with Christina Consolo, also known as the RadChick, talking about these very strange events going on. But you know what? I was remiss at the beginning of the program, because usually I ask you to tell us about the radiation levels vis-a-vis this jet stream and Fukushima, and in the oceans, in the fish. Every time you come on, we seem to have new information that points to a continued escalation of radioactive levels across the country and across the planet. Do you have anything new to report on that level other than what we've already covered?
Yeah, we've detected radiation now in California almonds, dates, oranges, Florida grapefruits. In fact, the almonds were actually found by Japan because they imported them from California and found them to be radioactive and loaded with cesium. And these kinds of things, like we've talked about before, because of bioaccumulation and biomagnification, they're only going to get worse with time, and certain foods will have more of them than others. Right. So, I mean, no better time than to be an advocate for your own health and look into supplements and things like that. I prefer just to eat really healthy so I don't have to take a lot of vitamins and other stuff.
Right.
And just gauge, how you're feeling and what you're doing, and make that a priority instead of relying on, like, doctors to give you medicines to fix all this stuff, because that seems to be all that they're interested in doing.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that during the break. That the treating a symptom is certainly a very long and arduous road once you start going down that path. As a lot of you know, that I've been dealing with asthma type symptoms for a long time, and it seems that the more I get away from Western medicine and the more I get into holistic remedy, then I feel much, much better, and it seems to have a longer term effect and really reduce the symptoms. And the one or two times you were on, we were saying that it very well could be related to an increase. I mean, some of the symptoms I was having was an increase in radiation levels.
Uh-huh.
And and who knows? I mean, we just don't know. That's the problem. Is depending where you live. Well, as far as radiation goes, it doesn't matter. But depending where you live across the South, you could be being bombarded by radiation in the jet stream, or who knows what's bubbling out of the Gulf of Mexico or inland.
Yeah, but your body has a really incredible ability to heal a lot of that damage, even damage from being exposed to radiation. And Arnie Gunderson was interviewed by Tom Ritter last weekend, And he had asked them that too, like, where do you move now? You know, considering all the stuff that's going on, leaking nuke plants everywhere, all the things that have been dumped in the oceans and now are reaching their life expectancy in terms of the containers that they were put in.
Yeah.
Originally, you know, we've dumped just hundreds of thousands of barrels of nuclear waste all over in our oceans, and we've sunken, you know, nuclear subs, and so is Russia, and you know, I mean, it's really a mess what we've created, and your body can fix a lot of that damage if you stay on top of your health and make sure you get enough sleep and you support your immune system and keep that as healthy as possible.
No doubt about it, and the sleep being the biggest one. You know, that a good friend of mine, a good friend of the program, you know, told me a lot. This is what she does for a living. I mean, she is a nutritionalist, and you know, she's very concerned about not only the nutrition that you take in, but the giving your body enough time to repair itself, especially as we get older. That is paramount. I mean, you need to get your sleep, and I'm not talking, you know, at 2:00 in the morning and sleep until noon. I'm talking get to bed when your body's telling you it's time to go to bed, usually 9, 10 o'clock at night, and getting 7-8 hours that you need in order to regenerate and repair yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really important to stay on top of those things, and also just to have an awareness about some of these things that are going on are not meant to scare people, but just to make them aware, because there's such a lack of information, of real information coming out in this area of the sinkhole even, and the people around there, and they're starting to get...
What is the official line? What is the official line on the sinkhole?
The official line is that they're drilling relief wells, and they're hoping to deal with the situation by relieving the gas that's building up in the salt domes and in the aquifers surrounding the salt domes. But we don't know to what extent the groundwater has been contaminated by this one salt dome that's leaking in particular, which contains not only 51% diesel organics, but it has also been filled with radioactive waste. So we don't know where exactly that's going to end up. And that's kind of their situation that they're taking right now, is that they're expanding their efforts in drilling relief wells and trying to ascertain how many areas are leaking because of the bubbles that are being reported in areas as far as 80 miles away. So they're expanding it to a regional thing instead of just a local thing in terms of what they're watching.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, they have meetings that they were supposed to have. 7 agencies in Texas Brine were all invited to a meeting that was put together by the locals so they could get updated, because they hadn't had an update in 6 weeks, and nobody showed up to this meeting except Texas Brine. And since then they scheduled another meeting where they did show up, and that was you know, the position that they were taking was that they're just staying on top of it, and they keep sharing information as much as possible. But the mandatory evacuation that included, I believe, 150 homes is still in effect. And that may or may not be expanded.
All right. Well, in about 4 minutes or so here, and I just dropped another a link in, guys, in chat about the sinkhole situation. Christina, you know, the things we've talked about, the ongoing Gulf oil spill disaster, potentially being part of this, the off-gassing of radon, and this bizarre, what was the other? Sulfur, yeah, the bizarre sulfur emissions, the seismic activity, you know, like I said, all the way through the heartland, and you know, obviously in Louisiana with the sinkhole. What is, I mean, you know, worst case? I know you're not trying to scare anybody. You mentioned that to me during the break. But what is the worst case scenario of what we're looking at with this bizarre activity, coupled with the fact, you know, that as you work with Moore, he's talking about the military letting people know a few months ago, be prepared to get out of this area. I mean, what is the worst case scenario that you guys are talking about in this field?
Well, it used to be just people in California needing to have, you know, bug out bags living along the San Andreas Fault, but I think we all need to have them now, even if you live in the Midwest. You know, we've had a lot of earthquakes, just a 5.1 in Ontario overnight, mm-hmm. which is really unusual. Just having a plan So if something does happen, you know how to get in touch with your family, especially if you have like teenagers that I do. Everybody's all over the place. They're, at school and different places. If your cell phones don't work, if you can't get a hold of each other, that you have a place that you can meet up, that you have a list of items or you have a bag packed ready to go in case you do have to leave for a while, and that you have maybe a long-term plan for where you could stay out of state with relatives if something happened in your area where you couldn't be there for a while. And, it's going to be more of a concern if you live around a nuke plant or you live around a fault zone. And for right now, if you live along any of the southern states with what's going on, that you just have a plan, because talking about it right now is a lot easier than trying to figure it out after it happens. And I mean, these are all things, survival basics or instincts that like everybody should be taught in school anyway. Mm-hmm. And you only learn about this if you take like a survival class. But being prepared and things like that. If you have relatives that have been through any kind of war situation, they usually have a pantry in their house with 2 years of food. And that's how I grew up, having two parents that were in World War II. And that was kind of normal for me. But, we've just kind of been placated to think you can go to the store anytime you want and buy anything you need.
That's
and most people don't realize with the, is it GTI, where they keep only things on the shelves for like 3 days?
Yeah, that's right.
In order to keep like the prices level and so forth, supply and demand. There's only 3 days worth of stuff in stores.
And it went 1,500 miles to get there. They do turn that inventory on average every couple of days. So and you're right. Most people just think that it comes from a store. And I've talked on the program. I think in regions of the country, people are far more dependent on that than others. But the majority of the people don't have any kind of supply, any kind of preparation in their home for a disaster, natural or otherwise. So I couldn't agree with that assessment more. I'm looking at this. What we had is 7.0 in Colombia just the other day, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Crazy things, Christina. Where can I hear your program real quick before we run out of time?
On UCY TV, it's on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
And also I can follow you on YouTube at iChica4X,
yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Did I say that right? iChica4X.
iChica X4.
Oh, X4. I transversed it. Christina, thank you very much. I look forward to getting you on again next month to give us this awesome news. I guess terrifying. I mean, it's important we know of. It is scary stuff, and I do appreciate you devoting so much time in keeping us informed. Christina and Solo, thank you very much, guys. Stay tuned. We're going to be back. You betcha. We will be back hopefully with no more technical issues here in about 6 minutes, and it's going to be.